Good evening, friends. I welcome
Good
you all
evening.
on behalf of IMA Mumbai branch. As you all know, we are going through a difficult time of this COVID-19 since last few months. There are many problems we have to face. At the same time, we are trying hard to find out solutions for these problems. You know, last 4 months, we never had a single live CME, and that is not possible for next few months. So what options we opted is webinars like today's CME, online CMEs rather. You all know that diagnostic modalities of COVID-19, since it is a new disease for all of us, medical fraternity, are changing, as well as the treatment options. And to update on this, we have two eminent speakers with us today. One is Dr. Akshay Sevak, he is a radiologist, and another one is Dr. Ajay Phadke, a pathologist. Both of them are eminent speakers. I welcome them all, both of them on behalf of IMA Mumbai branch. I now request Dr. Anil Awad to go ahead with the further proceedings.
Good evening, all. The next agenda is presidential address. Our newly elected president, Dr. Sujatun Sattar, cannot be present for today's function because of some unavoidable circumstances. So she has just given her message for this program. I'll just read out the things. Good evening to all of you and happy Doctor's Day. On behalf of IMA Mumbai branch, I welcome you all for today's webinar and celebration of Doctor's Day in the memory of birth and death anniversary of late Dr. B.C. Roy. This day is a great opportunity for all of us to appreciate the contribution by the stalwarts in the medical field in academic, professional, and community service. These personalities are a role model for the next generation of medical practitioners. In this pandemic of COVID-19, they have been on the forefront in treating the patients and community service for mankind and still continue doing it. Doctors are also human beings and they do their best for their patients. This year we are honoring doctors who have been frontliners, our COVID warriors who have recovered and continue to work and giving yeoman services community at large. Thank you very much. So this was the address given by our president, and I request Deepen also want to welcome the delegates there from DJ Shield.
Yes, sir. So Dr. Award, this is Sanket Barale, Dr. Pankaj. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to coordinate and host this this webinar. We are delighted to be a part of this very important conversation, and welcome the opportunity not to do this this time, but also in the future. So I just wanted to appreciate the opportunity and welcome the panelists.
So friends, without wasting any time, we'll begin with today's webinar. The first speaker is none other than Dr. Ajay Phadke. I'll just read out this small short biodata of Dr. Ajay Phadke. Dr. Ajay Phadke is head of SRL Dr. Avinash Phadke's labs in Mahi, which has been in operation since 1965. He completed his MBBS from D.Y. Patil College with a gold medal in medicine and distinction in ENT and ophthalmology. He then did his MD in pathology from St. G.S. Medical College and KM Hospital with merit. He has a special interest in molecular diagnostics, infertility, and flow cytometry. The lab operates with highly advanced instruments such as MALDI TOIF Biofiber and India's first Cobas Pro by Roche. Dr. Ajay believes in using the right test at the right time, and that education regarding tests is crucial for appropriate medical care and is a strong proponent of medical training. Dr. Phadke's lab has been performing well over 1,000 COVID tests a day by RT-PCR over the last few months. That's a great achievement. I request Dr. Ajay Phadke to start his talk, Essentials in COVID-19 Lab Diagnosis.
Thank you, sir. Thank you to IMA for inviting me as a speaker on this webinar. And I would like to really commend all the work being done by all the doctors on the front line at this time. And I hope everyone remains safe and we all stay together and get through this in one piece. So I'll just share my screen. Just let me know if you can see it after that. Can you see it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll just start the. Yeah. So good evening, everyone. Today's talk is about COVID testing essentials, and I think there are a lot of points to cover. So I, even though like Dr. Pankaj very rightly said that it's a very new disease, we don't have all the information about all the diagnostic tools available at the moment. I will try to do my best with whatever data we have gathered over the last 2 or 3 months and our experiences with the same. If there are any questions, feel free to ask in the chat and I'll try to get to them. So let's start with some cases. First, as we all know, this image I think is common to everyone. Everyone knows the structure. Just some things I want to point out is that it's called coronavirus because of the spike proteins on the surface. And there are important antigens, which are the nucleocapsid antigens and the spike antigens on the surface. I'll come to why I'm talking about it later. Now, first case, I would like to start with a 50-year-old male who had actually gone to the general practitioner on day 2 of fever. The fever was around 101. Along with that, there was a body ache, but there were no other symptoms. There were no respiratory complaints. There was absolutely nothing else. It was only day 2 of fever. So the doctor advised a routine CBC. On the routine CBC, if you can see it, if you notice the WBC count is on the lower side. How do I point? Okay, just a second. Yeah, can you see the pointer?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so the WBC count is on the lower side. And one very striking thing which we are seeing nowadays in many of the cases is that the lymphocyte count as well as the eosinophil count is also low. The absolute lymphocyte count is also low. So that is all we had on the CBC. But the doctor advised to do the COVID test or the RT-PCR. Now remember, it was day 2 of fever. The swab was taken from the oropharynx as well as the nasopharynx, and meanwhile the patient was kept on the quarantine at home. But the fever did not subside. On this day, the COVID test had come negative. So on day 2 of fever, the COVID test has come negative. Now the fever continued to be the same after on day 4 of fever. The oxygen saturation remained under control. The patient was advised another RT-PCR on day 4, and this time the test has come positive. So on day 2 it was negative, and day 4 it has come positive. This is something which I'll come to, but this is a very common phenomenon which we are seeing. Similar case, 40-year-old female came with day 4 of fever, around 100, severe body ache again, CBC again showed lymphocytopenia. Patient was advised an RT-PCR on day 5 of illness, and the patient tested positive on day 5. So the question is, why have I brought this up is, first of all, when should you do the RT-PCR swab? Do you do it on day 1 of fever? Do you do it on day 2 of fever? What should we do? If you see this, okay, this is a study which was recently published a couple of weeks ago. If you see, this is nasopharyngeal swab, this is oropharyngeal swab. This is the days since the symptom onset, and this is the sensitivity of the RT-PCR test. This is actually a meta-analysis and a review of all the published literature which was there in the past. So what we are seeing very clearly is the sensitivity in the early stages is quite low. It peaks around 4 to 5 days of symptoms. So this is what we have also noticed in our lab. We have multiple cases where on day 1 and day 2 of fever, it is negative, and on day 4 to day 5, especially day 5, it is turning out to be positive. Also, only oropharyngeal swab or only nasopharyngeal swab is not as sensitive as both together. We have seen cases where only oropharyngeal swab has come negative and both together again have come positive. So the first point I want to make is, whenever we are doing RT-PCR, we should ideally do it on day 4 or day 5 of symptoms. Now, what do we mean by symptoms? Again, there was a study which was done in Hubei, China. This was quite early on in the illness, but a very important factor is that the median incubation period of this illness, as you know, is about 5 days. Most of the people, a majority, almost 98%, will develop symptoms within 11 days. So we have to understand that all those who have to develop symptoms will do so within 11 days, and the testing should be around 4 to 5 days. This is another very important point. Another study which was done, if you see on day one, the chances of false negative PCR results are very, very high. Now, it may not be 100%, but it's above 90% at times. You need to wait till at least day 4 of symptoms, and then the false negative rate falls down. Now, speaking about PCR, a lot of people are asking about CT values and what is a CT value and why should we report it. There was a study which was there in Ahmedabad from one branch of ICMR which said that CT value should be there in every single COVID report. Now, that was actually not adopted by ICMR, and I'll tell you the reason why. If you see this, this is the now PCR is real-time PCR is all about light generation. Whenever there is multiple or rather amplification of a particular gene, there is light generated, and this is plotted on the y-axis over here. Along the x-axis is the number of cycles, PCR cycles for the particular sample. Now, for any sample, when we run, the first thing we have to look at is the threshold. If there is fluorescence above this threshold, we give it as positive, and if it is below this threshold, it is given as negative. Now, wherever this threshold line, when we draw this threshold line, and if you draw the intersection of the threshold line and take it to the x-axis, this is what is called a cycle threshold. That means the time, the cycle number at which we are giving positive is called the cycle threshold. Now, why is it important? Now, if there is a high viral load, logically, we would think that every time this would mean that the CT value would be very low. That means the detection or the positive sample would happen very, very early on in the PCR cycles. It would not need to amplify all the way till 40. It would happen somewhere around 25 to 30 as well. Now, this logically is okay. Giving CT values is not the problem. But what is the issue with all of this? Number one, I would say the most important issue is that every single kit which we have today does not use the same gene. It differs from kit to kit. Some kits use E gene, RDRP, N gene. Some use ORF, RDRP, N. There are multiple combinations. So the biggest issue is that one lab is giving a CT value for RDRP at 32, while another lab is giving CT value of E gene at 28. How do we put these two things together? That's point number one. Now, if I take the same sample and I've given a CT value of 30, I take the exact same sample and I repeat the extraction and run the PCR again. It does not mean that the PCR, the CT value will come at 30 again. It can come at 28, it can come at 32. And that is the nature of PCR. It is not like a biochemistry test or creat where you will get 1.2, it will remain 1.2. PCR is not like that. The cycle threshold can change even for the same sample in a different run. That's number two. Number three, again, is very, very crucial here is that if you take it up in a few hours apart, the CT value changes. It can change. And the fourth thing, what is the viral load, right? How do you get viral load if you cannot use the CT value only? So there is a big difference in qualitative PCR and quantitative PCR. When we say qualitative PCR, we are just giving a positive and a negative report. Now, why are we not giving viral loads? Because the way you calculate viral loads is very, very different. If you see, you have to plot a standard graph. You have to compare your result of your PCR run to the standard graph. And then you know, okay, compared to the standard, I have got the CT at 30. So that means this patient in this swab has a viral load of 50 lakhs, hypothetically. So none of these kits are currently equipped to do quantitative analysis. And that will happen in the next probably few weeks. And once we start getting those kits which can measure the actual viral load, then that would be much more correlated with the clinical symptoms as well. So this is one of the things which we need to understand. Yes, so this is another thing. Now, if I were to take a PCR sample, right, like I said, it differs from day 2 to day 4. If I was to take the sample in day 2 or day 3, it will come positive, but with a very late CT value. That does not mean that this patient is not going to become serious or is not serious, and can lead to misleading results. So we have to understand that right now we have to just rely on whether it is positive or negative. In the future, when viral load starts coming out, we can go ahead and report that. This graph is again very, very important because you see here that RNA and antigen are both rising first, followed by the recovery of the patient. And while the patient is recovering, IgM and IgG almost arise simultaneously. I will come to this with cases later on, but I want to just keep this in mind. Now, case 3. We have a 65-year-old female who was actually admitted to the hospital with fever and breathlessness. Oxygen saturation was around 93. The history of fever was since 4 days. Uh, Antigen test was advised at that time, and the antigen test result was dispatched as negative. Patient remained on oxygen support. Now the question is, what do you do? Is it actually negative or not, right? This is, as you all know, any antigen test which you have will be on the basis of this. There are multiple steps involved to get this, but in general, you have a control line, you have a test line. If both are coming positive, then it's antigen positive. If only the control line is there, then it's negative. And if there's no control line, the test is invalid. So this patient had a negative antigen test result. So does that mean that the patient does not have COVID? It could mean two things. A, the viral load of the patient is low, or B, and B actually that there is a false negative given by this antigen test. If you look at this for for antigen testing, as the viral load copies go down, the false negative results on antigen testing increases. So that's very, very crucial. What does this mean? So if you have classic symptoms and if you are testing and if it comes negative, it does not mean that it is negative, because the sensitivity of this test is around 50%. So you cannot say this negative is a true negative. It could be a false negative. So that is one of the big issues with antigen testing. Number two is this. There was a study. It is not done on the same kit which is available in India, but it was a study done on this other kit, which is RespiStrip. It clearly said that wherever you have PCR detected, in 74 cases of PCR positive, there was no detection of antigen. So again, the false negative rate is in fact, in this study, it is very high, but we can consider it to be around 50%, which is quite high. And it will not give confidence to clinicians to discharge patients or to treat patients knowing that only the antigen test is negative. So I would believe that the RT-PCR is more sensitive and specific than the antigen test. So yeah, so the discrepancy was all because of this, that the sensitivity is around 50%. Now, if you get positive, what does it mean on antigen testing? You can safely say that it is positive. Why? Because the chance of false positives are very low. It's a very, very specific test. It's almost approaching 100%, around 99%. So you can, whenever you have a positive result on antigen testing, then it is definitely a positive. You don't have to worry about that. When there is a negative result, you will have to see what is to be done next. So the ICMR actually come out with another guideline saying that if the patient is symptomatic and antigen test is negative, then you have to do RT-PCR. If the patient is asymptomatic, then it is up to, you don't need to do RT-PCR. But yeah, I mean, that makes sense, and you can at least follow that logically. So so this is, I think we have already covered this. So yeah, antigen test, higher false negative. PCR is more sensitive, it is more specific, but very, very important. The timing of collection is very important. The transportation is very important. The reporting criteria is very important, and which kit you're using is very important. So what should I do? If there is fever, I would still advise to do the PCR test. If it's not available, do an antigen test. Now we come to this controversial issue about COVID antibody testing. Everyone has heard about CART tests, you've heard about total antibodies, you heard about IgG, IgM, IgA, and everyone was asking what does it mean, right? So I'll just show you a couple of cases now. So first of all, this was a known COVID-19 patient who has come after 18 days, almost 3 weeks of the symptom onset. He came for antibody testing. He had recovered fully after that. Now, if you see here, the report says reactive. And here on the right, you see this is nothing but a cutoff. If anything is above 1, then we give it as reactive, and anything is below 1, we give it as non-reactive. So in this case, it was 15. I will come to it with some more cases. Then I will talk about the same. Another case who has a 36-year-old male, history of fever and sore throat 30 days ago. Now, he had come to do, he was actually monitoring his ferritin and C-reactive proteins for some time. The ferritin levels earlier had gone up. The CRP had gone to around 90. There was lymphocytopenia. And now he had almost recovered. He had actually completely recovered. So he wanted to just do a follow-up test. If you see here, now the monocyte count has increased, but the lymphocyte count has not fully recovered yet. The anti-COVID antibody levels are around 57. So if you remember the previous example, that was lower. and in this it is around 57. The CRP has come to normal. So there's a difference in this case and in this case. This is 15 and this is 57, right? The duration, if you notice, was around 30 days, and that was around 3 weeks. I'll show you another case. Sorry. Yeah. So the same case. So 57, the ferritin had also come back to normal. Now another case, same kind of situation. Fever done history of fever 1 month back. Only came to do a COVID antibody test. He had never got the RT-PCR done. In this case, it has come even higher. It's 91. So we are seeing progressively increased. I would not call them levels, but it's the cutoff is much higher than the cutoff, so to speak. Another 46-year-old male, totally asymptomatic, antibody test was done, and in fact here the level was 113. Then the last one was fever just 10 days ago. Still a lot of body ache, and there is myalgia, there is some lethargy, but in general the patient is asymptomatic. Now the doctor had advised as a follow-up only CBC, ESR, IL-6, COVID antibody, and CRP. If you see here, the lymphocyte count is still low. Absolute lymphocyte count is still low, uh, and platelet count is okay. IL-6 is high. Now, if you 23 is actually from what we are seeing is not that high. We have seen values of 800, 1000, 1500. So 23, when you see it, it may appear to be high compared to the range, but it's not very high. In fact, this patient had a higher level earlier. It was around 400. Now here you see it has come reactive. It's only 2.2. So what does this mean? That we have a patient who has not fully recovered, but the anti-SARS-CoV antibody has actually come as 2.2. So levels are not very high. So what exactly is going on here? Why has this come positive and the patient is still symptomatic? And why are the levels so varying, right? I will show you a couple of more, then I'll come to the explanation. You have another 29-year-old female with history of sore throat in the last 30 days. And again, her D dimer actually had gone up some time ago, about 2 weeks ago. And the COVID antibody test, the D dimer was to be repeated. If you see again, level was 62 and D dimer was 111, which is okay. Um, there's one case in which known COVID positive, again 28-day reactive antibody testing, ferritin high and D dimer still high. So 28 days after being tested positive for COVID, both of these were still high. So here I've tried to show you a full spectrum of antibody testing, right from people who have just recovering from COVID at 10th day, have a borderline positive at around 2, to those who have gone to 3 weeks, have it around 50, and those who are 30 days to more than 30 days who have gone to 60, 90. And the D dimer has also remained high in certain cases even after a month's time. So what is happening? Is this a quantitative test or is it a qualitative test? And how should we basically use this? It's a very important question. Uh, so first of all, let me cover this. Now, if you see here, there are 4 patients here, right? Who have this is the cutoff which I showed you. So this is the same cutoff which was given before. If you see the number of days are represented here. So as it gets to dark purple, that means the number of days has increased, and as it is light green, then the number of days is less. So this is after symptom onset. If you see this patient, right? So this is around 36 to 38 days, and the cutoff it's much higher, so around 50 to 60. In patient 3, which is around it's around 39 to 40 days, it's even higher. It's around 80, and in this patient at least as well, it's around 60. So as time goes on, the antibody levels seem to be increasing in the patient. Now, this is not a fully quantitative, but it's an indirect way of seeing the response to SARS-CoV in these particular patients. So this is another important thing. Now, when should you do this test? I showed you a patient who has even got positive on the 10th day. And there are many patients who have remained positive after 30 days. So what is the right time to do this? Literature says that at 14 days, right, there is a 99.5% sensitivity. That means you will miss out very, very few cases of those who have actually been exposed to COVID. So ideally, at least wait for 14 days if there is a symptomatic patient to even think about doing this test. the level will gradually increase. Now, how much time it stays for and how long it will stay for, whether it will fall or whether it will continue to rise, we really don't know at this point because it is very early. Uh, so one second, I will just see this. There's another question, very important. What is total antibody? Why are you not measuring IgM? Why are you not measuring IgG? And should you measure IgM, IgG? What about IgA? If you look at the CDC guidelines, they say right now there is no difference whether you measure IgG, IgM, or total antibody, because in fact, if you measure only one, there is a higher chance of missing out some patients who have actually been exposed to SARS-CoV. So I will just show you this one graph. These are the onset of symptoms, and there is IgM in this blue and IgG in red. If you see, surprisingly, that IgG is also rising early as compared to other viral illnesses, right? So normally you would see IgG rising much later, but in this case, IgG is also rising about a few days away from the IgM. So then, does it really make sense to see IgM as a marker of acute infection, acute or recent infection? I would say I don't think so. At least now, as per the data which is there, measuring total antibodies makes more sense, because what are you really trying to detect? You are trying to detect anybody who has been exposed to the coronavirus, right? And the best way to do it is to do total antibodies, because it detects of any type. It detects of IgM, IgG, and IgA is questionable, but it detects them. So it has a higher chance of it becoming positive, and that's why the sensitivity is higher. So this is the logic. Now, whether IgG is protective, we don't 100% know for sure. Whether it should be used in plasma banks, there is some evidence it is helping, but the titer has to be quite high, and it has to be given very, very early on in the onset of illness, not when the patient is critical. At the time of admission, when the oxygen saturation is low, that is when we should be giving plasma therapy. So this is how the IgG IgM response is, right? So do it after 14 days of symptom onset. And then how should it be done? Should it be done by rapid testing? Should it be done by ELISA? Should it be done by CLIA? What should be the ideal way? Now, sorry. The ideal way, if you were to ask me, would either be CLIA or ELISA. It's much more sensitive. It is much more specific. It is fully automated, and it has been validated in multiple sites all over the world with studies of almost 20 to 30,000 patients. Uh, so you can, if there is a good FDA approved or ICMR approved antibody kit, you should first do some validation and compare it with ELISA and CLIA and see how much it is detecting, and then only you should use rapid testing. Yeah. So what does it mean? Now, if you have these total antibodies positive, all it means is that you were exposed, you were infected with COVID-19 at some time in the past. You can make a reasonable assumption as per the table I showed you earlier. Higher the duration after infection, more are the levels of antibody. So you can sort of assume indirectly that you were infected 30 days back if your levels are 80 to 90. Now, the second thing is, do you have immunity? You may have some immunity. How much immunity, how long it lasts is not clear at the moment. Now, again, timing of the test is extremely important. Do not do it too early because you will get a false negative again. So wait for 14 days and then do the test. And yes, plasma banks are being set up over the world using IgG testing, because they are still assuming that IgG is the protective antibody. Now, there are kits today which also measure IgG only. When should you then do this? If you want to measure only IgG, then wait for at least 3 weeks to do only an IgG test. Don't do it at 2 weeks, because the sensitivity of only IgG will be lower than a total antibody test. You can do the IgG levels alone, and then you will know, or you can assume indirectly, that you have some degree of protection. Now, what else is important? Is one antibody test enough? We have to understand this concept of prevalence. As the prevalence of a particular illness in the population goes up, then the chances of it, the positive predictive value of the test goes up as well. So in India, if we reach a 10% prevalence, then the chance of a positive antibody test actually being positive is much higher. So what are people saying? Do two tests 2 weeks apart. If it's one is positive and the second one is also positive, you can safely say that yes, you were exposed to COVID at some time in the past. Now, yes, I already mentioned this. It's very important that validate whatever rapid test kits you're using with an established standard like CLIA or ELISA. It's very, very crucial that you do that. So there are so many vendors around, and it is very, very difficult to understand which are the quality vendors and which are not. Yeah, so this was the study in China. Yeah, again, this is the CDC guideline, which says that IgM may rise 2 or 3 days prior to an IgG, so it doesn't make sense only doing IgM testing. This is what I had said. If the prevalence is 10% in the population, then doing 2 tests will increase the sensitivity of the assay to, and the PPV of the assay, sorry, to 97%. Now, I would like to summarize the findings which we have so far. So first of all, this is again the CDC guidelines which are put up on the screen. Obviously, let's start with viral testing. China. Hello. Again, this is the CDC guideline which says that IgM. I can hear an echo. 3 days prior to an IgG, so it doesn't make sense only. Yeah, sorry. So viral testing. If you take viral testing, if you have a positive result, it means you currently have an active COVID infection, and you can pass on the virus to others. You stay at home and follow all your guidelines, local guidelines. If it's negative, you do not currently have an active COVID infection. Now the question comes when you have both, when you're doing both together. There have been cases where you have got both viral RT-PCR positive as well as antibody positive. So what does this mean? There are studies to show that PCR can detect the dead virus as well. So you cannot differentiate whether you're detecting the dead virus or you're detecting the live virus. But for all clinical and practical purposes, if your RT-PCR is positive, you must assume that there is an active infection, and you should assume that you can give it to somebody else as well. So you have to ideally follow all important guidelines and don't assume that you have protection just because your antibody has come positive. Now, if you have only antibody positive, you have probably recovered from a COVID-19 infection, right? And you may have immunity. So you can see this. It will be helpful if you're especially doing 2. For any PCR, do it on the 4th or 5th day. For any antibody testing, wait for 14 days. If it's only IgG, at least wait for 3 weeks. So most of it will be clarified that way. So the last slide would be this. Now, ideally, like I said, both of these you wait for 4 to 5 days. Antibody testing, it can come positive as early as 5 days as well, but it will have very, very poor sensitivity at 5 days. So wait for 14 days. Now, for an urgent point of care sort of situation, antigen testing has been recommended, but be very, very careful of the sensitivity. It is much lower than that of PCR. Both require swabs, both require nasopharyngeal swabs. The antigen test also requires a bit of expertise to perform it, and it has to be done within 15 to 20 minutes of collecting the swab. So if you leave the swab outside after collecting it and don't do the antigen test, it has a chance of coming even more false negative again, and further lowering the sensitivity. Does it require confirmation, the antigen test? Yes, especially if there are symptoms and it has come negative, then please send the sample for RT-PCR. Yes, and antibody testing is mainly used for serosurveillance. It is not a diagnostic test. We cannot say that because it is positive, the person has COVID-19 now. It is probably the person has probably recovered from COVID-19 and currently is not suffering from the infection. In very rare cases, as I showed you, there can be positive cases along with antibody testing, but that's very rare, and we are not sure what it really means. It does not whether it's dead or live virus. So this is the summary. RT-PCR would be the gold standard. Collect on the 4th or 5th day. Use ELISA or CLIA or any good rapid kit which has been validated compared to these two. Now, total immunoglobulin is much more sensitive than doing either IgM or IgG. And IgM and IgG rise within a few days of each other. More the duration after which symptoms have occurred, more is the chance of detecting a positive antibody test, and higher the levels are in the antibody test as well. Yes, that's it. I think I'll stop the lecture here. And if there are any questions, you all can ask me. Let me just check. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ajay Phadke. Are there any questions? Because there are hardly few questions.
How long will you see?
There's one. Dr. Dilip Pawar has asked you, how long will you see the IgG antibodies in a positive patient?
So like I said, it at least from what literature is there today, it has remained at least for 50 to 60 days we have seen. But since we don't know, it's too early a duration to tell exactly how much time. We'll have to wait for a few months to understand. But at least it stays for 50 to 60 days in many cases.
And so where they do the titer? Because I think it is available only at one place somewhere.
No, so the titer is available of IgG antibodies. The titer is available, and like I said, there are kits which do it only for IgG, not for total antibodies. So there are two different things. If you want to go in for plasmapheresis and plasma donation, then doing a titer is important, and we are able to do it. Most of the labs will do it, and it will come in maybe 2 or 3 weeks. The IgG titer properly on an automated platform. Yeah. Till how many days PCR will be positive? So like I showed you earlier, the PCR, the best time to do it is between 4 to 5 days. It can come positive between, say, maximum to around 10 to 14 days. Usually it becomes negative after 8 days, approx. Yeah. Do you recommend antibody testing in asymptomatic people who have to travel to go back to work? It if we are assuming some level of immunity which is there, then yes. If you are not sure about whether it is giving you immunity, then it will only tell you about the serosurveillance and whether they have been exposed. So currently I am not in a position to 100% say whether you should do it in asymptomatic people to go back to work, because even the CDC does not recommend it on the basis of that as of now. If antibody figure is high, sorry, it's do you have more antibody? Yes, it's an indirect way of saying that you have more antibodies. Like I said, there are many cases who have got a level of 2 and then it has become 60, 90. So as the cutoff level is increasing, you can say that yes, the antibody amount of antibody also has increased. Is the plasma therapy life-saving? So in severely affected, there are many studies. See, I'll tell you who produces the most antibodies. At least anybody above 65. Surprising, but true. Some studies have shown males produce more antibodies than females. And those who have had a severe illness will produce more levels of antibodies than who have not had a severe illness. So the best way to do it is so all over the world they're taking these three populations and they are doing plasmapheresis and collecting the plasma. Then of course maintaining all infectious disease protocols of screening for triple H and other infectious diseases, and then measuring the titer. Once you measure the titer, anything above 1:160 or 1:320 would be required to use it as a donor. So it is not helpful if the patient is already very, very critical and is on ventilator. It is best given in the early on in the course of the disease. When is viral load starting in PCR qualitative? I think it would be starting probably in 2 to 3 weeks now. CRP and ferritin levels, how sensitive? They are not diagnostic tools for COVID, because CRP can even be high in malaria. Ferritin can be high in any acute inflammation. So they would not be markers, but they are markers of severity of a patient who are who's already diagnosed with COVID, just like IL-6.
Sir, what is the level of CRP we take it as a maybe a COVID positive?
Like it is not a. I mean, we are seeing levels right from 20 to 100 in CRP. So it is not used as a diagnostic tool. It is only used to suggest maybe. So what we normally are seeing is we are seeing lymphocytopenia, we are seeing eosinophil count low, we are seeing ferritin levels high, CRP levels high. IL-6 will be done later. So these four things are currently seeming to correlate well with positive patients. And a lot of people are doing CT scans, chest CTs. It's very, very sensitive even early on in the illness, even more sensitive than RT-PCR, I would say, early on in the illness. So yeah, so this is what would be done. Do we repeat PCR? Companies have been advised doing RT-PCR test or antibody test for employees before resuming. I already have covered that. Doing a PCR test for reporting to work would not be required. It would increase the burden on the healthcare system. yes, antibody tests, if you are getting large amount of positives in there, you can assume that there is, in that area, there is local transmission happening. Yeah, so D-dimer is a very critical thing. We have seen lots of cases in COVID where the D-dimer levels are very elevated. There have been levels, so around 500 is considered normal, but it has been almost 1,400, 1,500. It remains like that for a lot of time. People are then put on low molecular weight heparin. So as the severity, there are many cases actually of autopsies done where there are blood thrombus formations in multiple small vessels of the body. So somewhere there is a coagulopathy happening, and D-dimer levels is an indirect marker of that. So monitoring D-dimer levels in serious cases is very, very crucial. So I think most of it I've answered.
Yes, sir. There's one question from Anil Pachnekar. Dr. Anil Pachnekar has asked you, sir.
I can't see the.
Sir, there is one question from Anil Pachnekar.
Yeah. What is the question? I can't.
He wanted to know about herd immunity.
Well, herd immunity right now, I'll tell you, we are getting, we have done almost 15 to 20,000 samples of antibody currently. We are getting a positivity around 10 to 15%. So I don't think right now we are at the stage where there is herd immunity, as of now at least. I mean, I have very limited data now, so I am not the right person, but we have to observe it over a period of time.
Ajay, this is Dr. Utture.
Hi, sir.
Yeah, hi. See, nowadays,
Sorry?
if they are, asymptomatic or very less symptoms, they are sitting at home, right? At home
Yes.
isolation.
Yeah.
Now, we at home isolation, we are only doing the finger PCO2s we are doing, that is all, and pulse rate we are taking. You advise any investigative modalities which can pick up early if they are going to land up with any problems, say like D-dimer or CPR or the counts,
Yes, sir.
high levels, low levels of this. So
Yes.
what do you suggest as far as that is concerned? And when should they do these tests in those 14 days?
Yes, sir. So basically, what we have seen is that a lot of patients who have come to us on the, say, third day of fever and who are maintaining oxygen saturation, we are advising to do a CBC first, CRP levels, and ferritin levels as of now. As CBC should not be monitored very often, but every week, ideally, we should monitor it. If the ferritin is shooting up a lot, if the CRP level is doubling, and if the lymphocytopenia is further reducing, I mean, it is dropping further, these are supposed to be signs of those patients who may require hospitalization.
So we find 7 to 10 days, majority of the problems, at least symptomatically, they are presenting.
Yes.
Do your investigations, can they catch it at least 24 to 40 hours, 48 hours before the symptoms appear?
Before they appear, unfortunately not right as of now, at least, because all of these things are reacting to the viral replication in the body. So the viral replication actually does start when the patient is pre-symptomatic. So there are some studies to show again that one of the most sensitive things is a simple CBC, and the CBC. But the question is, how will we do the CBC if there are no symptoms? I mean, if there are symptoms, then we can do it on even early on in the illness. But nothing else can be done before to predict it.
No, in a positive patient, I'm asking you.
Okay, positive patient. Yes, yes.
7 to 10 days are the most crucial days.
Yes, right.
Beyond 10 days, they are quite on the safe ground,
Correct, yeah.
So before 7 days, is there any investigation which we can do which can point towards this patient going in for problem?
Yeah, so these three which I mentioned, and then IL-6 levels. So the three investigations in IL-6. IL-6, we are seeing a lot of correlation with those who are actually going into, who require oxygen support, who need to be put on ventilator. IL-6 levels are going to 8,000, and it is correlating very, very well with the clinical progression of the illness. So when the patient is being treated, then the IL-6 level is coming down. And sometimes what we are also seeing is that after the patient is completely fine, after 7 to 10 days, for some reason, it is again, IL-6 is again rising. And then again on the chest CT, there are some symptoms of, there are patches. So IL-6 seems to be correlating quite a bit. The only problem is very expensive. So it is not something which can be done on a sort of mass level unless we are able to get it at much lower cost from the vendors. But it's a very sensitive test.
Thank you.
Yes. I think.
Yeah. Are we over?
Uh,
You have got 3-4 minutes left. 3-4 minutes.
Yes. For not so similar period. Any other questions are remaining? Yeah, I think I've answered most of the questions.
Yeah, thank you very much,
Yes, yes. No,
Dr.
no.
Ajay Phadke. It was wonderful session.
Thank you for inviting me.
Love to hear you again. So the second time I'm hearing you, but it was a very good topic. And thanks a lot from all of us. And
thank you for
that. Your SRL laboratory will do more and more tests in the coming few months.
Anil.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anil.
Yeah.
Pankaj here.
But
there is one announcement to make. Tell all the participants that immediately after second speaker, we will be having this announcement of our COVID-19 awardees. So stay with us after the second lecture. Immediately we'll be starting that program.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Uttare say thanks for inviting me, Dr. Pankaj, Dr. Anil. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
So friends, the next speaker is Dr. Akshay Sevak. He's our own person, but still I'll give a short introduction of Dr. Akshay. He's a consultant radiologist practicing in Mumbai since 1987 with special interest in ultrasound. He completed his MBBS, DMRD and MD from KM Hospital, Mumbai in 1986 and was awarded gold medal by University of Mumbai for highest point at MD examination. He got his formal training in ultrasound and CT scan at Newham General Hospital, Royal Marsden Hospital and Moorfield High Hospital at London. At present, he is associated with Dr. Dalal's Clinic and Insight Health Scan as consultant radiologist. He is a panel radiologist for USA visa, UK visa, Australia and New Zealand visa. He has served as honorary radiologist at various hospitals and charity centers. He has held office bearers posts in IMA, IMAMS, C Ward and D Ward medical associations as well as in Rotary Club. Today, Dr. Akshay Sevak is going to highlight on imaging in COVID-19. I hand over the session to Dr. Akshay Sevak.
Good evening, everybody. Am I audible?
थोड़ा कम आ रहा है सर आवाज.
Am I audible?
Yeah,
you are audible, sir. You are audible. You are audible.
Come nearer the microphone, Akshay.
The volume is little less.
Yeah. Share the screen. Audible. Hello. Hi, everybody. Am I audible?
You are audible, sir.
Okay. Shall I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah.
To begin with, I would like to thank the office bearers, the managing committee, and the committee of the College of General Physicians, General Practitioners, IMA, Mumbai branch, for inviting me for this talk. And before I begin this talk, I would like to thank all those active COVID warriors from IMA, from Maharashtra State, from headquarters and all over India who are working hard to control this pandemic. And also, I would remember and give my heartfelt condolence to all those medical doctors, the health workers who have died treating those patients. I now begin this talk on, I'll be speaking on imaging in COVID. As you all know that COVID is an extremely unusual viral infection which has affected the whole of world, and so many people are affected by it. And we as medical professionals are trying hard to control this pandemic. Before I start with the imaging facilities which are used in COVID-19, I would like to give a brief introduction of clinical features and the lab tests in COVID infection. Now, the clinical presentation is the illness severities usually vary from mild to critical. In the mild case, there are no symptoms. There is mild coughing, which affects 70% of the patients, and fever, which affects 85% of the patients. Severe will include dyspnea, hypoxia, or lung involvement, which is almost 43% on imaging. And critical one is respiratory failure, shock, multi-organ failure. Abdominal and other symptoms are possible, and the disease can be asymptomatic. The mortality statistics, as everybody knows, in some series of patients, there is around 3 to 4% of those who had a positive test of COVID-19. Since the number of people who are were infected, but not tested for the virus, that is the carrier, is not known. The actual mortality for this infection is probably much lower than the present day. Now coming to the lab tests, diagnostic tests, or what Dr. Ajay Phadke has given elaborate talk on that, but I will just go through it briefly. That RT-PCR test specifically detects and amplifies the viral mRNA. PCR test is very specific, but has a sensitivity can take more than 24 hours. Compared to PCR, CT scan results are available right away. But there is a lot of global discussion going on among radiologists whether CT scan should be considered earlier than doing a PCR test. I will talk about it in my slide. Other common laboratory tests for COVID-19 are identifications of decreased lymphocyte count. 20 to 30% of COVID-19 patients have normal X-ray. Positive COVID-19 patients have a normal X-ray. And approximately 9 to 10% have chest X-ray abnormality prior to RT-PCR positivity. What is the technique of X-ray? You should take a PA view or a posterior anterior view wherever possible using a CR or a DR system. CR means a computer radiography. A DR is a digital radiography. AP view are usually captured for ICU patients, as you cannot take a PA view in ICU setup or those in isolation ward. Portable X-ray machine preferred for patients admitted in hospital. Cassettes and the X-ray room to be sanitized before and after taking the X-ray. Radiographers should wear all required personal protective equipment. It is not advised to use lead shield for women of reproductive age due to the chances of cross-infection. Instead, it is advised to use a good collimation of an X-ray beam. Monitor which is used to read these X-rays should have a resolution of not less than 3 megahertz with the image in DICOM format. Now, coming to the findings, what are the common findings which are seen on chest X-ray? The common findings, and which are classical of COVID-19, is bilateral, very important, peripheral, lower zone consolidation, or ground glass opacity. Bilateral in 75% and unilateral in 25%. So most of our 75% of the cases of X-ray CBC, there is a bilateral involvement. Pleural effusion is very rare. Even the lymphadenopathy is also very rare and may be seen in associated with patient with associated comorbidities. Pneumothorax is rare and is seen more often in patients on ventilators. Then there is a hyperventilation. X-ray findings are the worst at 10 to 12 days, recovery of chest X-ray findings and RT-PCR was similar. If you see that there is a decrease in changes of findings in the X-ray, even the RT-PCR will show similar changes. Long term, nowadays we have been getting a lot of patients on ventilation. There is a hyperventilation. So the work at 10 to 12 days, recovery of chest X-ray findings and RT-PCR. There is an echo coming. There is echo coming. So nowadays we are seeing a lot of patients coming for X-ray after treatment or after getting a recovery. And we have seen that there are patients having minimal early interstitial fibrosis, especially those who have had pneumonia in the lung. There are a lot of echoes coming.
1 minute, Akshay. Bandarkar, please mute yourself, please.
Yeah. Okay. Now the reporting format as advised by the Indian College of Radiology and Imaging, this is the exact format which is given by where there is a chest X-ray finding present absent, right upper zone, right middle zone, left upper zone, left middle zone, and left lower zone. And the severity of the score is mild, moderate, and severe. Mild is for 1, moderate is 2 to 3, and severe is 4. Now, how the scoring is done is when the lung is normal, the score is 0. When less than 25% of the when less than 25% of the lung is involved, the score is given 1. Up to 50% of the lung is involved, the score is given 2. And up to 75 is 3. And more than 75 is 4. Now, what is the purpose of this scoring? It is to convey the severity and compare between serial radiographs. This was, as you can see in this slide, prepared by one of the doctors at AIIMS New Delhi. And the format will include the pattern as I've shown above, and the final conclusions are given in either one of these, either the X-ray is normal or classical or probable COVID-19, indeterminate for COVID-19 and non-COVID-19. So normal one will be no finding on chest X-ray, COVID-19 not excluded. In the classic or probable, as I said, you will have lower lobe prominent, peripheral, predominant, bilateral, multiple areas of ground glass opacity. Now, indeterminate, it does not fit into classic or non-COVID descriptors. And non-COVID-19 will have findings like pneumothorax, lobar pneumonia, pleural effusion, pulmonary edema, lymphadenopathy, and so on. Now, we have to remember that chest X-ray is not a diagnostic modality for novel COVID-19 infection. The report should be taken in conjunction with another clinical parameters, travel exposure history, and virus isolation in swab. Now, I will go through few of the slides. Now, if you see this X-ray on the left-hand side is an X-ray PA view, which essentially looks normal, but there is some evidence of prominent vascular markings in the right lower zone. So this would have been reported normal by radiologists, but on a CT scan, you can see that there is a ground glass opacity. Now this shows that X-ray may be normal in initial stages, but CT can pick up the early infection. Now these are the two X-rays of a patient where on admission, the patient essentially, except for the bilateral hilar congestion, X-ray looks essentially normal. But within next 4 days, this is what has happened to the lung, where both the middle zone and the lower zones are affected. And the patient already has a bypass surgery done, as you can see from the sternal sutures, has a rhythm problem. As you can see, the external pacemaker is there. And now the patient is on ventilator. How do I remove this? I can see the videos of the picture on this. Anyway, the chest X-ray finding in COVID-19 include the patchy resolution, patchy consolidation, pleural effusion, perihilar distribution, and peripheral distribution. Now, in the A X-ray, you can see this haziness seen in both the lower zone and little bit in the right mid zone. Now, how do you decide about the zone in the lungs and chest X-ray? If you see, this is the first rib, the anterior end, this is the second rib. So and any lung above the second anterior end of the second rib is known as upper zone. Any lung between the second anterior end of the second rib and the fourth rib is considered as the middle zone, and anything below the fourth rib is considered as the lower zone. Coming to pleural effusion, there is a left side pleural effusion as seen by the arrow. There is a little bit ground glass opacity here, which is known as the perihilar ground glass or pneumonia, which is developing. And in this last D X-ray, you can see the peripheral opacities. These are very classical of the ground glass opacity, which are seen over here in the right mid zone, and 2 or 3 are there in the right lower zone. So this is also an X-ray, which is a peripheral opacity seen. This is a digital X-ray. Those were the CR X-rays. You can see that there are little haziness seen all over the lung. This is also a classical of COVID-19, which was positive. Now, this is the case of a 72-year-old woman admitted with acute respiratory failure, fever, and dyspnea. You can see at the admission, there are just a little ground glass opacity in both mid zone, right lower zone, and little congestion in the left lower zone. And as the time progressed, 4 hours, 24 hours, and within 72 hours, it is almost like an ARDS pattern. Now, this is the chest film of a 70 to 83-year-old male with a mitral, which is the associated comorbidity. There's a mitral insufficiency due to cardiomegaly, prominent pulmonary vein, and atrial fibrillation with COVID-19 infection. The ground glass opacities are seen in the right mid and upper zone, and little bit in the left lower zone. Now, this I was talking about an X-ray. This is a police officer from Mumbai who had come to our center for a X-ray after his recovery, and there is almost 3 weeks after his discharge. And you can see that there are little early interstitial disease changes in both the lower zone. So this, he was advised to do a certain lung exercises, but he refused, and he was getting coughing. So he was worried that whether he got reinfected. But actually, he is developing what we call early interstitial fibrosis, and it has now been reported that most of the patients who recover with a pneumonia when due to COVID infection, they do have some amount of interstitial fibrosis. Now there is a thing about artificial intelligence and chest X-ray. Now this is a very new imaging technique where they are trying to replace a radiologist from the field, but it is going to be unlikely that a radiologist will be replaced. But it does help in such a unusual situation which the world is facing, that there are a lot of infections, the infection is spreading fast, it's taking more time for diagnosis, and this is where these tools are helpful. What is this artificial intelligence? It is widely used for medical imaging. The researcher pulled all the X-ray images of COVID-19 infected patients as well as healthy persons from the internet, and they trained a machine learning architecture or with a deep learning algorithm with these images. Now, that is exactly what is done with artificial intelligence. And the deep learning method is an advantage that it learns to disease diagnosis features from the X-ray images in an automatic way. The tool developed also uses images from other lung infections such as tuberculosis, pneumonia to ensure specificity of detection of COVID-19 from other lung disease. This tool outperforms such high-tech tools available globally. There are many other global firms who have their own software. Moreover, it uses simple machine learning architecture, which makes it stand out over others. Now, this is the software which is developed by IIT Gandhinagar in Gujarat. How the artificial intelligence-based tool analyzes X-ray. They can cater a larger population and help to try. That is what I was saying. It helps to triage the patient still you are awaiting the RT-PCR results. It takes only few seconds to analyze the digital X-ray image. Normally 2 to 3 seconds you will get the results on the screen. And the many softwares are available. Few examples are those which are one made in India is the IIT Gandhinagar one. The Siemens has their own software, GE is there, and Cura is also another software. Now this is how the report comes with an artificial intelligence. If you see that this is the original image which is captured by the X-ray, then on the computer, the artificial intelligence software will give it is with different color areas. Now, if you see in the original image, there are little ground glass opacities seen in both the mid zone. So this goes in favor of a COVID-19 infection. Now, and in the this could be even a normal pneumonia. We don't know what the history of the patient is, but this software will tell you what are the probable findings. There is emphysema. There is a little bit air radiolucency seen in both the lower zone. There is a pneumonia, and there is little fibrosis. And they will give you the probability, that is 0.64. As you can see from the scale, anything above 0.2, below 0.2 is considered to be normal. 0.2 to 0.5 is indeterminate, and anything above 0.6 is suggestively likely to be of COVID infection. Now this is another way, another software which will give the images. This is the lung. If you see, there are little opacities seen in both the lower zone, but you don't know. This could be just a bronchiectasis bilateral. But if you look at artificial intelligence, you can see that this is almost red color on both the lower zone with a pink color, and the blue one is normal.
हो सर, हाँ बोला ना.
Okay, shall I go ahead? So this the score will be more than 6, so this goes more in favor of a COVID infection. Now, as far as the chest X-ray summary consider the literature is limited. We are still learning from it. Chest X-ray has a poor sensitivity and can be normal in COVID-19 patients. Chest X-ray can be used to assess the disease progress or severity. This is where the chest imaging modality is very useful. The most common pattern is bilateral consolidation, ground glass opacity. Bilateral is very important for COVID-19. And peripheral, bilateral, peripheral, and lower zone predominant. These are the three important findings to diagnose a COVID-19 infection on a chest X-ray. Pleural effusion is very rare and is always associated with some comorbidity. Now coming to CT scan. Now, what is the role of CT scan? The role of CT scan is the triage of patients. That is either it divides it into 3 groups: no COVID-19 possible, or most likely COVID-19, and severity of disease. It also predicts the worsening of the disease. It's a prediction of improvement also. Sometimes it helps in solving certain clinical problems, and it always, as everybody knows, it helps in the diagnosis of complications like pulmonary embolism. Decision to use CT for triage. When you should use the CT for triage? When the priority chance of COVID-19 is very high, means the probability of having a COVID infection in a group of population is very high, then you should start using as a triage, and when the other modalities are not available. But the disadvantage of CT scan is availability, and ideally there should be a one CT for the use of doing a CT scan in suspected corona infection patient, or they are now known as corona CT, or there is a clinical suspicion in patients with negative PCR. So these are the 3 main things where you can use it for a trial. Now the CT scan technique, usually an HRCT is done, and a 1 millimeter slice thickness is taken. Higher the number of slices that which the machine has, like 16 slice machine or 664, 128, 26, the faster the scan is done and less is the radiation. Contrast injection is to be avoided as far as possible, and if one has to do an injection, a normal serum creatinine is absolutely mandatory, and also the patient should be, even with a normal creatinine, the patient should be very well hydrated. Volumetric reconstruction of data capture is done, and even with CT, you can use artificial intelligence for reading the scan if software is available. Now, what are the findings? These are the 5 to 6 findings which are seen on CT, which is known as ground glass opacity or GGOs, and then crazy paving appearance, airspace consolidation, vascular thickening, traction bronchiectasis, and reverse halo sign. Now we will see how it looks on the scan. Before that, the initial CT pattern in COVID-19. Now, out of these, if you see this slide, almost 70 to 90% of the patients will have one of these findings like ground glass opacification, bilateral involvement, posterior distribution, multi-lobar involvement, and peripheral distribution. Consolidation, if only consolidation is present on a CT scan, it is likely that 32%, it is 32%, it is unlikely it could be a COVID infection. Now, GGO pattern. Now, if you see this CT scan, there is a ground glass opacity seen in the right, on the right side as well on the left side. And what is this GGO pattern? It happens because whenever there is an infection, as you know, the anatomy of the lung, the alveoli are filled with fluid because of the inflammation. And this is what causes the ground glass appearance. It's the most common finding in COVID-19 infection, usually multifocal, bilateral, and peripheral. And in early phase of disease, the GGO may present as a unifocal lesion, most commonly located in the inferior lobe of the lung. So again, bilateral, peripheral, lower zone, lower lobe prominence, and in CT it is added more of the posterior lung is infected than the anterior lung. This is a crazy paving. Now, in the initial stage, you will get a ground glass appearance, opacity, the little increase in the infection. You will see this type of pattern where you will see the linear opacity, white lines within the ground glass appearance. If you correlate pathologically, it is basically the lining of the alveoli which inflames and becomes thickened, and which is seen on a CT as a white line or an interlobar septation, what we call, and that gives a crazy paving appearance of that opacity. So this is the second important finding. The third important finding is the vascular dilatation in the ground glass opacity. Now, you see here, there is a ground glass opacity in the left lung, and these are the vascular dilatation. You don't see the vessels anywhere else, but here you can see the vessels. And this is the plain CT scan. There is no contrast given, and still you can see these vessels dilated, which are branching so beautifully. The third important thing, fourth important finding is the traction bronchiectasis. Because of the fibrosis developing in the later stage of the infection, you will see certain air within the small bronchus. This is known as traction diverticulum, traction bronchiectasis. This is a reverse halo sign in the ground glass opacity. That is also one of the important findings seen when there is a little recovery in the patient with COVID-19. Now, coming to the CT scan report, as suggested by the Radiologic Society of North America, there are 4 typical appearances, 4 different types of reporting formats. Either a typical appearance, indeterminate appearance, atypical appearance, and normal appearance. Normal CT scan report. Now, what does this typical appearance look like? It's a peripheral, bilateral GGO or visible paving method, multifocal GGO with consolidation or visible interlobar or crazy paving pattern, and reverse halo sign. All the signs which we have discussed in the previous slide, if they are present in a CT scan, it goes under a typical appearance suggestive of a COVID-19. When there is an absence of any of these typical findings, like it is associated with consolidation, then which may be not be peripheral, which may be more central, or may be involving the anterior part of the lung, or a very few small ground glass opacities, and it goes into the indeterminate appearance. There is atypical appearance, that the absence of typical or indeterminate features like isolated lobar segmental consolidation, small nodules, lung cavitation, and pleural thickening or effusion. So these are all atypical appearance. And negative for pneumonia, that means there's no pneumonia or absent GGO and consolidation. This is a 4 reporting format which is given. There is also a scoring system in the, some of the centers do give a scoring system, but that detail I think is not required at this level. Now, these are the few CT scan slides. You can see this early stage, there is a ground glass appearance with the critical matter. This is what happens when there is a later stage, when there is a recovery. It recovers with a residual fibrosis, which septation going right up to the pleura. So this is the later stage in the recovered patient. So this is the scan of a patient with an early infection where you can see posterior predominance, anterior part of the lung is normal, small ground glass opacity. Again, the same thing, posterior lung is involved, a little bit on the anterior side, in the left upper lobe. And the same patient, if you see the axial scan, this is the anterior part of the lung. You can see the heart is anterior. There is just a small ground glass opacity. And as you go posteriorly, you can see the amount of lung which is infected. That is, this clearly specifies that this is a posterior predominant ground glass opacity and likely to be a COVID infection. So that's all about CT scan. Now coming to the chest ultrasound in COVID-19 patients. So very helpful diagnostic modalities for patients who are under treatment in an isolation ward or in the ICU. Now the indications are still evolving. There is a risk stratification. There are a few studies and it is not established. Monitoring and decision making in ICU useful and suggested. This is the most important indication for chest ultrasound. And chest ultrasound is not a screening tool for diagnosis and exclusion. COVID-19 patients may require ultrasound for abdominal or antenatal scan. What are the preparations for an ultrasound scan in a COVID positive patient? It should be preparation and cleaning of ultrasound room, preparation and cleaning of ultrasound machine, preparation of ultrasound transducer involving cleaning and disinfection. In isolation ward, ideally a dedicated scanner should be available. The probe should be covered with disposable plastic cover. The sonologist should wear a PPE during the scan and machine covered with a plastic cover. The technique of chest ESG in ICU. The sonologist shall have 10-second video clips in a DICOM format from 14 areas, that is 4 anterior, 4 posterior, 4 laterally, and 6 posterior. And in case of a patient on ventilator or who are unable to maintain a sitting position, the clips should be obtained from minimum 8 areas, 4 anterior and 4 laterally. Posterior may not be possible, but may attempt to take clips from both basal area. The total scan time should be 2 to 3 minutes. In Western countries, the sonographers or the nurses have been trained to take these video clips so the radiologists or the sonologists don't have to be in touch with the patient. And then these clips are interpreted by the radiologist outside the isolation room or ICU. Scan need to be in the intercostal area. That's very important for the widest possible surface in one scan. Now, these are the pictures of what a normal scan. If you see on the left hand side, this is a normal scan where you will see the reverbation horizontal lines which are known as A line. And you will see in the real time that there is a sliding of the lung as the patient is breathing. In case of COVID-19, we will see this white band which comes. These are known as B lines and they are like a laser light, which is due to the focal thickening of the pleura and also because of subpleural consolidation. As we have seen on X-ray and CT, the classical features are peripheral involvement of the lung. So in ultrasound, you will see this B line. And it is said that multiple the B line, the more severity is a disease. Severe is a disease. These are the findings. These are the 3 findings which are seen on ultrasound. The posterior lower lungs are more involved. The B lines, as I said over here, and it is as you monitor the patient in ICU, the number of B lines, if they are decreasing, it indicates the patient is responding to treatment. If the number of B lines are increasing, means the patient is getting worse. Other findings which is seen in the very early stage is, you can see this is a white line, that is a pleura, and there is a disruption, interrupted pleural line, that is one of the sign of COVID infection. The other thing is a small, there's an interruption of the pleural line with little white shadows behind that. That is known as subpleural consolidation. So these are also an early signs of COVID-19 infection. You can see a localized effusion, and then you see a reduced blood supply on Doppler. There is a scoring system even for an ultrasound of chest in a COVID-19 patient. The potential utility of chest ultrasound in COVID-19 is a rapid assessment of the severity of COVID pneumonia or ARDS. It tracks the evolution of the disease. It monitors the lung recruitment maneuvers to guide response to the prone position and management of extracorporeal membrane therapy, make decision of weaning patient from ventilator support, and assess the complications associated with COVID-19. To sum up, this is our last slide. Imaging is not indicated in patients with suspected COVID-19 and mild clinical symptoms unless they are at a risk for disease progression. Imaging is indicated in a patient with COVID-19 and worsening respiratory status. In a resource-constrained environment, imaging is indicated for medical trials for suspected COVID who present with moderate to severe clinical features and a high probability of a disease. Moreover, performing CT scan routinely for a large cohort of patients carries an additional risk. The risk are depletion of finite resources, especially PPE due to excessive usage, increased risk of viral transmission to the staff, patient, and technicians as COVID-19 is positive and come in close proximity in the radiology department, additional ionizing radiation exposure. So it has been said that having a dedicated portable X-ray, portable ultrasound scanner, and a dedicated corona CT scanner is ideal for imaging in a COVID-19 patient. Thank you for your time and attention. Any question answers?
Dr. Akshay sir, excellent presentation.
Yeah,
excellent presentation. Really enjoyed a lot. In fact, what I have seen that when X-ray chest is a positive with the, can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, I can hear you.
When the X-ray chest is a positive with the pneumonia changes and all, and sometimes we want the HRCT reports. At that time, the HRCT people are very much reluctant to do the HRCT of the lungs. What I have seen in a practical field.
Yeah.
At the same time, sometimes they ask the COVID-19 test to do it first, and then they are ready to do the HRCT test. At that time, patient may get more serious. And third of all, what I have seen in the radiology, there are two groups. One group is saying that CT is the most crucial and important things in detecting the COVID-19, and the others are opposing it. So what is it, sir?
No, it is that the clinician has to decide whether this patient requires, normally the HRCT people should not refuse doing a scan just because the patient doesn't have a COVID-19, because there is always a chance of cross-infection, because they are also doing a non-COVID CT scan. So when they do a CT scan, because there's a protocol to desensitize the machine, the whole CT scan room, and everything takes time. So that is the main reason why they don't go ahead with a HRCT. But according to me, they should not refuse if the clinician has a strong suspicion of a COVID-19 infection. Okay?
Yes, sir. And in the radiology, there are two groups.
Sorry?
In radiology, what I have found, there are two groups. One is supporting CT in the COVID, and
Yeah,
one is the opposing city in the COVID.
Yeah, as I talked to you in my slide, there is a big global discussion going on whether CT should be used, but most of the American societies of radiology and European Society of Radiology, they don't advise CT scan routinely. They say that according to their experience, it only should be used when you have some clinical confusion in the treatment of the patient, or you expect some complication like pulmonary embolism. That is the time you should do a CT scan.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Great experience to see you and to hear from you.
Yeah, and congratulations to you for your award. Keep it up.
We all of us.
There are a few questions.
Yeah.
The question from Tilip Chatterjee, sir. How common is airspace consolidation as compared to CGO in Corat's categorization?
Can you repeat the question?
How common is airspace consolidation as compared to GGO in Corat's categorization?
Yeah, no, the airspace consolidation is, as you see in my slide, this is only consolidation is only 32%. So more common finding, if you see only consolidation, it is unlikely to be a COVID-19 infection. And the only way to differentiate is COVID pneumonia from a non-COVID pneumonia on a CT scan or even on an X-ray, what we call as a lobar pneumonia, is by the margin of the consolidation. If the margins are heavy, it goes more in favor of a COVID-19 infection, but if the margin is sharp, it is unlikely to be a COVID-19 infection. But if you see 100 CTs, you will see 80% or 90% of them, of those who are having COVID-19 infection, will be having a ground glass opacity. Only 30% will have consolidation.
So one more question. After how many days of onset of COVID-19, one should ask for HRCT X-ray?
Now that for a screening purpose, you should not advise, you should not take an X-ray, but if there are clinical signs, if the symptoms are mild to moderate symptoms, then immediately the patients, those who are admitted, they go for a chest X-ray. But in a routine clinical setup, till the time the patient has mild symptoms and all the lab findings are within the normal parameters, you should not go for a chest X-ray. But yes, if those patients who are admitted, then they have to take a baseline chest X-ray.
Okay, we'll just wind up the session here.
Okay, thank you.
Very much, Dr. Akshay Sevak. You are a part of IMA only.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much for accepting.
It was nice seeing you all today. It was nice seeing you all today.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I now request Dr. Pankaj Bandarkar to take over the session, and just for the benefit of all listeners, Dr. Pankaj Bandarkar is not only Secretary of IMA Mumbai branch, but is also Honorary Secretary of IMA MS Maharashtra State branch. Over to Pankaj.
Thank you, Anil. Now we are going to felicitate our COVID-19 warriors. Can I go ahead, Anil?
Yeah.
Yes.
Please specific Anil Pashnekar or Anil Award.
Anil Award. Pashnekar will be coming shortly. Thank you. Good evening, friends. I welcome you all on behalf of IMA Mumbai branch. I also welcome Dr. Shivkumar Utture, President MMC and our past President. I also welcome Dr. Anil Pashnekar, immediate Vice President of IMA HQ. I welcome Dr. Hozi Kapadia, who is the chairperson of today's Doctors' Day Celebration Committee of IMA Mumbai branch. Friends, the entire nation is going through a very tough time because of COVID-19 pandemic. All the medical fraternity in association with the government machinery is trying hard to control the COVID-19 pandemic in India. With the mission of selfless service, our doctors are at front line in ICU and isolation wards wearing PPEs. They are not only giving medical attention, but also emotional support to the admitted patients. Quite a number of our members are running their private clinics, giving the patients first-line treatment and scrutinizing COVID and non-COVID patients. Doctors with administrative skills and good public relation machinery are helping the government agencies in tracing, tracking, and treating the COVID-19 patients. Today, the medical fraternity is fighting COVID-19 battle on all fronts, be it in hospitals, private clinics, social activities, helping government and corporation in the best possible way to control the COVID-19 pandemic. Friends, in this battle, few of our colleagues have collapsed. Few have injured but recovered and joined this force and fight against this deadly virus. Friends, as you all know, IME is always on front foot, recognizing good work done by our doctors. Hence, we have decided to appreciate and felicitate few of our colleagues for their good work. We are sure there are many more working silently without coming to anybody's notice. We salute them all today on occasion of Doctors' Day. Now, I request Dr. Hozi Kapadia, Chairperson of Doctors' Day Celebration Committee, to say few words. Dr. Hozi Kapadia.
Good evening, friends. Doctors' Day is a special occasion where the doctors community felicitates and honors outstanding doctors who have excelled in academic or community duties. Last year, we have facilitated doctors who did exemplary community work during floods in Maharashtra. This year, we are honoring doctors who have done outstanding, commendable work in this corona pandemic. First of all, we salute the martyrs who have laid down their lives in the line of duty treating COVID cases. This year, many of our members have worked in fever clinics, door-to-door check, quarantine cases, COVID ICU, and ventilators. In spite of certain shortcomings and in the substandard PPE and unhygienic condition in the slums, the government should also protect the doctors while amending the act that is violence against doctors, and they should give us standard PPEs. And also the life insurance should be there for private as well as public doctors. Senior doctors like me work from home, giving advice on phone and doing the telemedicine. It was something different as we are all used to personal touch. I would like to speak about the Dharavi model, which was also recognized by the WHO, where private and public partnership did wonders. The patients are more amenable, have more faith in their own doctors, and they willingly come out for treatment. Here our friends, President Maharashtra Medical Council, Dr. Shivkumar Utture, and immediate past National Vice President, Dr. Anil Pasnekam, and their whole team of dedicated workers did a wonderful job and brought down the infection rate fast. This model should be carried out in all the wards. Lastly, and I again congratulate all the awardees for the excellent community work. And please, there are many others whom we don't know who also deserve awards, and they have done. Everybody has done excellent work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, Dr. Hozi Kapadia.
Thank you, Dr.
Now I request.
Excellent talk.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Now I request our past IME Mumbai branch past president, Dr. and MMC president, Dr. Shivkumar Utture, to address the gathering, sir. Dr. Shivkumar Utture, sir.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. And welcome to IMA Mumbai branch. It is a very important day because a branch is basically felicitating those members who have really worked during all the details of what is happening. But I request to all our members is there are many members who are getting the Doctors' Day awards for having suffered in COVID and then returning back. But you have to remember a lot of our colleagues from different areas have not returned back to work. So whatever protocols have been given by ICMR or WHO, throw them into the dustbin. As far as doctors are concerned, as far as healthcare workers are concerned, when you are working in your OPDs, please, for God's sake, use a N95 mask, use a face shield, and use gloves. Even today, unfortunately, ICMR says that you have to use a 3-ply mask. But let me tell you, we have been telling everybody right from day one that this is a viral problem. This is a virus disease. And there is going to be aerosol transmission. Unfortunately, WHO never said that. They talked about droplet. And it was just yesterday that WHO has also accepted that there can be airborne problem as far as this virus is concerned. So if you want to save yourself, because you have to remember that this problem is not for 10 days, 15 days, 1 month, 2 months, but this problem is going to be there with us for the next minimum 1 year. So 6 months down the line, we are expecting the vaccines to come in. I said that, let me tell you, for you to get vaccinated, it will require minimum 6 months. And therefore, for the next 1 year, we have to take care of ourselves. So whenever you're doing your duty in your OPD, please wear a certified N95 mask with a face shield. Face shield is also extremely important, because if we are talking about airborne diseases, remember, your eyes are open, your rest of the face is exposed. Invariably, you will be touching that area afterwards. So a face shield is also a must as far as your OPD practice is concerned. And unfortunately, especially this is for my friends who are doing family practice or GP practice. What IMA statistics has come out recently is that those who have succumbed to this disease, as far as doctors are concerned, more than 60% are family physicians. So you are exposed the most. So you have to take the highest care whenever you are doing your practice, because you have that much volume of patients who come to you. And as you are all aware, 70 to 80% of these patients are asymptomatic patients. That means the patients themselves also do not know. And now we are in the era where we are going to have the monsoons, and you are going to get fewer patients who are going to be of either vector-borne diseases or any other problems other than COVID. And hence, I pray all of you all take care of yourself the next 1 year, because we do not want to turn out positive in the future, and we definitely do not want any of our colleagues, because your life is precious to you, to your family, and of course to the nation, because you are going to treat that many hundreds of patients in your life in the future. So thank you very much, Dr. Bhandarkar, for having called me here today. And thank you all the COVID warriors who are getting awards today, and also those who are working for the COVID but have not received awards. Maybe for some reason we do not have the details of such colleagues with us. So congratulate all of you, and let us all go on working so that we contain this disease and we win over this disease. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shivkumar Utture. Thank you very much for your advice to all the doctors. Now, if Anil Awad is ready, I will just shortly introduce all the winners of COVID-19 awardees. And Anil Awad, are you ready?
Start. Yeah.
I think let me start with our own president of MMC, Dr. Shivkumar Utture. He is the president of Maharashtra Medical Council and past president of IMA Mumbai branch. Key person in organizing medical workforce of private doctors for government and BMC hospitals in the initial phase, and he is continuing it now. Also guide and coordinator in patient tracing drive in Dhayavi, which has attracted attention not only nationally but internationally also. provided PPE kits to resident doctors in government and corporation hospitals when there was scarcity of PPE kits with the help of private donors. First person to arrange injection tocilizumab for critically ill patients admitted in BMC hospital, Dr. Shivkumar Utture. Next awardee is Dr. Anil Pachnekar. Dr. Hozi Kapadia has mentioned about him, a fearless frontline warrior, we call him a Don, of Dharavi, who along with his teammates screened thousands of people of Dharavi to bring down number of COVID-19 patients in Dharavi. Continuing coordination and has active participation in phase 3 Dharavi project. He is member of Private Doctors Coordination Committee of Government of Maharashtra for Mumbai district under chairmanship of Mumbai City Collector. Dr. Anil Award.
Yes. The third awardee is none other than our secretary, Dr. Pankaj Bandarkar. He has served outdoor patients from the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic without keeping his clinic even a single day closed. He has worked day and night all the days. He has also been a part of IMA Mumbai branch initiative to arrange money for measuring the interleukin levels of serious patients receiving injection tocilizumab in BMC hospital. He is a member of Private Doctor Coordination Committee of Government of Maharashtra for Mumbai district under chairmanship of Mumbai City Collector. Congratulations, Dr. Pankaj Bandarkar.
Thank you. Our next awardee is Dr. Sujatun-Nisa Attar. She is the president of IMA Mumbai branch. COVID warrior was screening patients for COVID-19 in Saifi Hospital. Dr. Sujatun-Nisa Attar, congratulations. Our fifth awardee is Dr. Girish Rajadhyaksha, professor and head of medicine department, Nair Hospital, treating critical COVID-19 patients at Nair Hospital right from the beginning of pandemic. Also worked at Kasturba Hospital, Seven Hills Hospital during this COVID-19 pandemic. Dr. Rajadhyaksha. Congratulations, Dr. Rajadhyaksha. Sixth awardee is Dr. Sachin Patharkar, our young active member of our branch. He is member of COVID Donation Committee, Accommodation and Transport Committee of BYL Nair Hospital. Also, he is a warden of PG Hostel of Nair Hospital. Congratulations, Sachin Patharkar. Next is Dr. Surendra Shingnapurkar. Dr. Surendra Shingnapurkar, a senior family physician, president of MDMPA, part of Mahim Dharavi project, grassroots worker of Dharavi, and continuing his participation in phase 3 drive of Dharavi project. Next is Dr. Pragji Waza, our senior but young member of our branch, working and treating outdoor patients at Lal Bagh right from the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, instrumental in arranging blood donation camps with local NGOs and attending fever clinic. The ninth awardee is Dr. Mohtasim Solkar, consultant at Masina, Habib and Noor Hospital, donated himself and arranged donations for distribution of ration to migrant workers. Our 10th awardee is Dr. Rishma Palep. With her husband Jaideep Palep, through their Dr. Palep's Medical Education and Research Trust, providing PPE kits, sanitizers, pulse oximeter, masks, even snacks for frontline resident doctors working in government hospitals right from the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, spending about rupees 2 lakh per week, helped 2,000 resident doctors of KEM, Sion, Nair, Zeze, Cooper, and Wadia Hospital. The 11th awardee is Dr. Deepak Baid. He is a president of AMC, was first to respond to call given by Commissioner of BMC to arrange private doctors workforce for BMC hospitals. He is a coordinator at Rajawadi Hospital for private doctors. The 12th awardee is Dr. Nilima Bhamre, Honorary Secretary of AMC, in charge of coordination of Private Doctors Committee for Hindu Hriday Samrat Balasaheb Thackeray Hospital, Jogeshwari, and Shatabdi Hospital, Kandavali. She is also a part of Mumbai Dhadkan Group, doing lot of good work in Mumbai. The 13th awardee is Dr. Dilip Pawar, instrumental in getting donations for distribution of injection tocilizumab, PPE kits, ventilators to Nair Hospital, Tata Hospital, and Seven Hill Hospitals. The next awardee is Dr. Vikram Khanna. He is an ENT surgeon in charge of coordinating doctors for Bandra Bhaba Hospital, providing services to the patients admitted in Maha Hospital, Chembur, which is a dedicated COVID hospital. The 15th and the next awardee is Dr. Dhiren Kalavadia, Treasurer of Indian Medical Association, Maharashtra State, in charge of coordination committee of private doctors for Kurla Bhaba COVID Hospital, part of coordination team from the beginning. He is member of Private Doctors Coordination Committee of Government of Maharashtra for Mumbai Suburban District under the chairmanship of Mumbai Suburban District Collector. The 16th awardee is Dr. Mangala Gomare. She is an Executive Health Officer of BMC, active member of IMA Mumbai branch, involved in controlling COVID-19 pandemic in Mumbai city. The next is our own Dr. Anil Awad, today's host, attending fever clinics, treating all outdoor patients in his clinic right from the beginning at Lalbagh, participated in many fever clinics in Lalbagh, got infected himself, and again rejoined duties recently. Dr. Anil Awad, congratulations. The next one is Dr. Milind Toroskar. He is attending fever clinics, got infected himself, and resumed duties again in Dharavi. Next one is Dr. M. Satish, a physician whose hospital is open right from the beginning, got infected himself and joined the duties again. Our 20th awardee is Dr. Aspi Rahimalwala, a senior member from our branch, a gynecologist, got infected himself and again joined duties recently. The next one is Dr. Salim Sachani, our past president, our branch past president, a family physician, senior member, got infected and resumed his duties again. The last but not least is Dr. Arvind Patel, family physician, senior member of our branch, got infected, has joined duties again and treating outdoor patients in his clinic. I congratulate all the recipients of COVID-19 Warrior Awards on behalf of IMA Mumbai branch. We wish them good health and request them to continue their good work. We pray Almighty to give them success in their selfless and fearless fight against this deadly COVID-19 virus. Now, I request our Honorary Joint Secretary, Dr. Girish Lal.
Mr. Sanket wants to say something.
Yes. Okay, please go ahead.
Mr. Sanket Barale wants to speak something because such programs require some help in some way, and we have been we have got help from this DG Shield, and the founder of DG Shield, Mr. Sanket Barale, wants to say a few things for us. He's a health IT expert, innovator, and entrepreneur. He's also a founder of FIG MD, a Pune-based venture-backed company that manages healthcare data for about 40% of the USA citizens. Over to Mr. Sanket Barale.
Dr. Awad, thank you so much for that brief introduction. I'll be brief with this. I want to just share something with you. I'm the only member of my family who got into health IT. The rest are all doctors. So I've kind of stayed very close to the profession. With my my parents, my uncles, cousins, they're all in the healthcare profession. And as this pandemic unfolded, we in health IT were able to work from home quite effectively. The entire FigMD and DigiShield organization, which is almost about 1,000 people, I was able to get them to work from home, and everybody's working from home safely. But none of the attendees have that option. And whatever we can do in health IT as citizens themselves to support you guys and support all of your hard work, we will do. And I think the first and foremost things that we can do is just stay home and not become a patient that burdens you unduly. So with that sort of a little bit of a personal story, I want to thank the IIMA Mumbai branch for the opportunity to be a part of this. I've been working in healthcare and health IT for almost 20 years, and been based in the US, and developing novel solutions for helping doctors digitize and helping them analyze their data. And with that end, we started DigiShield last year. And initially, we took a process of being, it's basically a telemedicine application. It has an AI-based electronic health record in it. You just take a photo of your prescription, it digitizes the prescription, and you're able to do touchless payments and various things. So end of last year, we went to market, and we had a revenue model associated with it. But as we got into COVID, felt it very essential for us to contribute something. So we decided to make DigiShield free for life for all IIMA members, and then we are obviously promoting this sort of knowledge exchange and conducting these updates. So I encourage everybody to check out the solution, see if it's valuable to you. It's free for you guys, and take it from there. And I appreciate everybody that is doing such a difficult job in these extraordinary times, and keeping us all safe. I keep on saying that I hope I never see you in the hospital, but if I have to, I'm comforted that all of you are there for us, taking care of us. So thank you for all the hard work that you guys are doing.
Now I request Honorary Joint Secretary Dr. Girish Lad to propose vote of thanks. Dr. Girish Lad.
Okay, let it be. I personally thank both the speakers for today's webinar, Dr. Ajay Phadke and Dr. Akshay Saivar, because both of them come with a very short notice. I also thank the DigiShield owner, Dr. Sanket Balare, and he has promised that he'll be giving DigiShield free to all IIMA members. It is a telecommunication, teleconsultation app, and it will be given free to all IIMA members. I thank all I congratulate all the Corona warriors who received award today. And the certificates will be given to them on their emails. Am I correct, Pankaj?
Yes.
Yeah.
They will get hard copies also.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And they'll be given the hard copies also. And last but not the least, all those who have come in a very large number. We have lost a good number today's CME. So many of the delegates have to be on YouTube. Thank you very much for
Dr. Utture, Dr. Pashnekar, and Dr. Hozi Kapadia.
Yes,
thank them also. Yes.
Yes.
For their presence, valuable presence over you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for Dr. Anil Awad also.